All right, this is the review for topic 1.1, domain range, positive, negative intervals, along with increasing and decreasing intervals. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my key points here. I'm going to highlight and write my coordinates. This is -2, 0. That's an x-intercept. Okay, I have a relative max up here. Okay, that's going to be 0, 36. I have another x-intercept here. That's going to be 3, 0. Okay, I have a relative min here. This is going to be about 4.8, comma, -15. And then another x-intercept here, 6, 0. So I'm starting this off by graphing or plotting, writing down my key points, my x-intercepts, and then my maxes and my mins. So I have 3 x-intercepts. I have a relative max up here at 0, 36, and a relative min at 4.8, -15. Okay, so I'm going to start, and then we can underline too, right? Because what's going to be important on a lot of these intervals are the x values here. So I'm going to underline the x coordinate in my point. All right, so let's start with domain. So domain are all the possible x values. So this function goes all the way, starts at -infinity, and it's going to go all the way to positive infinity, right? All the x values are possibilities here. It goes all the way to the left, all the way to the right. So my interval for domain is going to be -infinity to positive infinity. Okay, you could also say x equals all real numbers. Okay, range is all your possible y values. So how far up and down can you go? So this graph goes all the way down to -infinity, and it's going to go all the way up on this side to positive infinity. So my range, just like my domain, is going to be from -infinity to positive infinity. Or we could say y equals all real numbers, right? Y could be all real numbers, any number. Okay, x-intercepts are easy to do because we've already highlighted them on the graph. We have -2, 3, and 6. So my x-intercepts are -2, 3, and 6. We could write those as -2, 0, 3, 0, and 6, 0. Or we could have just left them as a list, -2, 3, and 6. All right, the y-intercept up here is going to be 0, 36. Right, or you could just say 36. Right, both of those are acceptable ways to put it. Okay, positive. A graph is positive when it's above the x-axis. So here's an interval that's positive above the x-axis, and here's another interval that's positive above the x-axis. So if I write those intervals, that goes from -2 all the way until 3, right? We're using our x values to read it. So -2 to 3. And then again, it's positive from 6 until infinity. That's when it's above the x-axis, from -2 to 3 and from 6 to infinity. Okay, it's negative when it's below the x-axis. So over here, it's below from -infinity all the way up until -2. Okay, and then it's negative again from 3 until 6, right? It's below the x-axis from 3 until 6. So remember, we're using the x coordinates to write these intervals for positive and negative. We're also going to use the x intervals to write our intervals for increasing and decreasing. Okay, so this graph starts at -infinity, so it's going to start increasing from -infinity all the way till we get to this relative maximum, which is at 0. So it's increasing from -infinity until 0. All right, then it begins decreasing. So then it begins at 0, it starts decreasing. It decreases until we hit that relative minimum at 4.8. So it's going to be decreasing from 0 until 4.8. Okay, and then at 4.8, it begins increasing again. And it's going to increase all the way to the right, all the way to infinity. So then we're going to put union here, 4.8 to infinity. Okay, and those are the pieces of the key pieces of this function, of this graph. All right, second one. Okay, so again, before I even start putting any answers in, I'm going to highlight the key functions I have, or the key parts here. I have an x-intercept at -1, 0. I have an x-intercept at 4, 0. And I have a relative min at about 1.5. What's that look like? 6.5. So I'm gonna put -1, positive 1.5. Sorry, 1.5, comma, -6.5. Okay, my key points are there now. Okay, now I can start my domain. My domain's how far left and right can go. This graph goes all the way to the right, and it will keep going all the way to the, or it goes all the way left, and it'll keep going all the way to the right. So again, my domain is all real numbers, -infinity up until positive infinity. So x is a set of all real numbers. My domain, the lowest I can go is 6.5. Okay, and then the highest I can go is all the way up to infinity. So I can go all from -6.5 is the lowest part of this graph, all the way up to infinity. So I'm looking at the y values when I'm writing the range. Okay, and then you could say y is greater than or equal to, I'm sorry, this needs to be a bracket because we're including -6.5. So this should be a bracket. Okay, and then y is greater than or equal to -6.5. It has to be 6.5 or bigger. Okay, x-intercepts, we already have them listed, -1 and 4, right? Or you could write it as -1, 0 and 4, 0. Okay, the y-intercept on here is going to be 0, -4. Right there, 0, -4. Okay, positive is when we're above. So from -infinity up until -1, we're above the x-axis. And then again, from 4 to infinity, we're above. So our positive interval is going to be from -infinity up until -1. And then again, from 4 to infinity. All right, and then our function is negative from -1 all the way until 4. -1 to 4, it's negative. Okay, it's below the x-axis. All right, our function starts at positive, on the y at least, it starts at positive infinity up here, right? So we're decreasing. We're decreasing. We're going down all the way until we get to 1.5. So we're decreasing from -infinity, right, all the way to the left. We're decreasing until we get to 1.5. Okay, and then once we get to 1.5, we have a local min, so we go from decreasing to increasing. So now we're going up to infinity, all the way to infinity to the right. So we're increasing from 1.5 to infinity. All right, and that's that one. We got one more on here. Okay, this is just a line, so linear function, right? So our line can go all the way to -infinity, all the way to positive infinity. So our domain, again, is all real numbers. Range, we're going all the way down and all the way up. So that's going to be, again, -infinity to positive infinity. Or you could say y is the set of all real numbers. You can say x is the set of all real numbers. Okay, your x and y intercepts. So here we have an x-intercept at 2, 0. We have a y-intercept at 0, -4. Okay, positive. So again, this is the point 2, 0. So our function is above the x-axis from 2 all the way until infinity, right? To the right, all the way to the right. From 2, and then everything to the right of 2 is above the x-axis. So our positive interval is going to be from 2 to infinity. Right? Our negative interval, right? We start all the way to the left. You read it left to right. So from negative infinity all the way up until 2. We are below the x-axis. So it's negative. Okay, and then again, going left to right, this graph is always increasing, right? The slope is positive, it's increasing. So we're increasing from negative infinity to positive infinity, right? It's always going up. Left to right, it's always going up, which means it's never decreasing. So there is no decreasing interval for this line. Okay, and that's it for these 3 review questions.